Hi there, it's Carl, and a little bit of a ramble this morning, trying to bring a few ideas, revelations that are going around in my head this morning. It's just coming up to 8 o'clock, and I'm heading off to my work with Owlnet in the Vero office, which gives me some time to unpack, process, analyse my thoughts, and share them with you. So I appreciate you listening, and I would be very grateful for your feedback as ever. And I realise this is quite self-indulgent in a way, but I hope it's of some benefit as well. And I talk about revelations and ideas, and I suppose, and their opinions really, aren't they, that I'm sharing with you. And what might be the difference between a revelation and an opinion is its quality, I suppose. For me, a revelation would have some longer lasting and positive effect for people who have the revelation, for those who share that revelation with others, in this great ferment of life where we're just trying to understand and figure out and be happy. I suppose, I think that's what we're all trying to do in our own funny sort of way, in our own unique way. And that's why I've called this creating a life that works, or just a life that works. And I've got a child seat rolling around in the car next to me, so I'm just trying to secure that. Right, yeah, so a life that works. And this is, the reason why this is a bit of a ramble is because I'm trying to bring a few things together here. In the last few months, I've been working on the Purpose in Action program, where the idea there, as I understand it, is to create a business, and more recently a six-figure business, a six-figure income, doing a business, creating a business with other people of the same motivation, with some sort of ethical purpose. And of course that's very subjective. I suppose it is judgmental in a way as well. But somebody's ethical is somebody else's unethical. But you get the gist. I mean, why I was attracted to working with David Schofield, because I think his heart's in the right place. And people in that group are doing, in inverted commas, good things, or things I approve of anyway, at the very least. But I think they have unselfish agendas, and of course they have selfish agendas as well. But you get the gist. They're trying to do things that might help the world work a bit better, which is one of the better definitions I've come across, thanks to Mike Brodie at Owlnet. And the whole purpose of Owlnet is to create a world that works for all. Which, I mean, what other inspiration would you want, really, than that in this great big human endeavour where we're all trying to do our best and trying to find happiness? Is a cause or a motivation to move towards and be motivated by a world. The idea of a world that works is as good as any I've come across. And in bringing my ideas together, this on the course, what sort of business am I in? What is it I want to do? What do I do? What have I been doing that I can do now that can be of use to people and that I can make a living from? And this morning it is this idea of a life that works. I think that's what I've been preoccupied and interested by, is creating a life that works. Now, and then more generally fitting into a world that works for people. Because I could see quite early on in life as a kid and at school that things didn't seem to be set up too well for people's happiness and unfoldment and potential. I didn't use a word like unfoldment, obviously, when I was 5, but I could see that, my parents didn't seem terribly happy. And then as you get into the world, you see that the world doesn't seem to work that well. And presumably there are things that can be done about that. And then as I became a late older teenager, got a bit angsty about it and thought it was all to do with the human condition. And then when I got into my early 20s, I got in with a crowd of people of a sort of socialistic left-wing persuasion. So it was going to be structural changes or being a vegetarian that would make the world okay. And then in my later 20s, 30, I got into the new agey sort of stuff, where those were the answers to make the world work better. If everybody became a permaculturist and lived in a community, then everything would be fine as well. Imagine that. It sounds like hell to some people. Probably would be as well, And then just more recently, I suppose I'm missing out a decade, the lost decade. But where I'm coming to is what the sense I get and how I describe it at the moment is my ideological self. All those ideologies, you know, the ideology of having the right philosophical framework, of everyone seeing the world as I do and should see it like that. And everyone should be left wing, or everyone should be a permaculturist, or everybody should do this, that, or the other. All those ideological positions just recently, and I credit my subscription to some of the ideas and the agenda in the context of the intellectual dark web at the moment, of having my ideological self dissolve a little bit, get a bit of a kicking. And obviously, you know, on the semantics of ideology, maybe everything you think is a kind of ideology. But what I'm talking about here is how the imposition of my ideas on other people as ideology is falling away from me. It's like, you know, this whole world of allegedly 7 billion people is just far too big a thing for me to grasp and interfere with. So the best thing I can do is think of it in a very loose terms of a world that works. And I've no idea what the other billions of people are doing, and you know, I never will. So they'll be getting on with from their point of view, one of the 7 billion eyes on the planet and me's on the planet doing their thing. And I've come back to a more parochial, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but a smaller scale understanding. You know, what really matters is what I do in the little bit of the world or existence where I am, and to just do that well and tie that up with creating a life that works. Now for me, you know, some of the ideas that have persisted are, it seems like quite a good idea to be a home educator. It seems like, and that could change, it seems like quite a good idea. I mean, you know, if you don't know me, I'm in a family unit, I'm married, in a heterosexual relationship, and we are homeschooling. We've moved from the UK to Portugal because we think that gives us a chance to live more of a life that works, where we want to be in more of a smaller community, town, village, where it's possible to have a bit of a, not a small holding, because that sounds all kind of cheesy again, doesn't it, of the ideology of how I should live. But I don't know, again, it's about the gist of things. It's not necessarily about the specifics anymore, but, you know, small scale, human scale, village life, and knowing people in the area, you know, like the guy who wrote Sapiens book, you know, being able to recognise 150 faces, be part of something manageable, and that's quite a good scale for the 3 children we've got, that range from 7, the ones at the home that range from 7 to 2 months old. And he was a home birth, so you get the gist of where we're at in terms of, you know, how we want to live our lives. And I've got 2 older children as well, 2 daughters, one of 30 and one of 20. What will she be? 23 this year. Amazing. So children ranging from 30 to a fairly recently born baby, and so I have a worldly responsibility to those guys, as well as a spiritual and moral one, I think, to show, well, I was going to say to show them a life that works. Now, it's not, I don't think it should be for them. You know, this is, for me, creating a life that works, the ultimate aim of that is to be contented and happy. And dare I say it, if I return to that website address that day in October when I decided to give up having bad moods, that hasn't gone brilliantly well, but it's gone well enough to demonstrate a point that, for me, one of the indicators of living a life that works is to be bad mood free. You know, a life that works to me is quite a prosaic and rational matter of eliminating and reducing the things that cause unhappiness, rather than I suppose the dominant consumer culture where people are constantly seeing happiness as a thing to consume or get or to achieve. And again, you know, ideologically for me, I don't really subscribe to that, although, you know, I do find myself succumbing to those things occasionally as well, and what's it called, retail therapy and so on. You know, I belong Or I don't belong. Or do I? I exist in the world as it is, and with all the agreements of this world, and I'm looking to have my own domain of that, my own sovereignty. A lot of talk about sovereignty, isn't there, and embodiment, and these things of the individual asserting themselves and their rights, possibly. For me, it's a balance of, you can't not be in this world. You have to have a body, and to be in this world is to be in this world, and you have to be somewhere in the world. Your body has to be somewhere, and that body and that mind of that body are in a culture, a collective culture. And fighting against that, making yourself unhappy about that, is a pretty foolish thing, I think. Seeing how you might be able to adjust it seems reasonable and right. And like I say, minimising the things that irk you and cause you iration would be a sensible thing, functional thing to do, to me. So that's where I'm at. That's what I'm talking about. And one of the ideas that came to me this morning in terms of revelation, and I hope it justifies that branding or description, is this idea of having something bigger than yourself. So arguably you could say the culture and the context in which you live is something bigger than yourself. But I suppose I'm talking about something more guiding and moral than that. And it just occurred to me, like, what is bigger than people? And then all sorts of ideas came of, about the phenomenon of depression and suicide and unhappiness that people are experiencing. And the connection between that possibly and the idea of, what is bigger than you? What in your life is bigger than you? And I was listening to the Rubin Report this morning, and there was a college head, I think, who described himself, I think, as a conservative, old-school liberal in the American sense, a Christian. And it was clear that the ideas of teachings of Jesus and the scriptures and Christian belief, the basics of Christianity, were something that were bigger than him, that sat outside his life, that he could use as a landmark, as a reference point. And to me, that's the interesting thing about religion, is that it doesn't matter specifically. Just nearly witnessed a head-on crash then. This is a Portuguese driving. Very interesting how it works. So sometimes a near-death experience for commuters here. Anyway, that's another story for another time. So this, Christian belief, the important thing, people can argue about religion until the cows come home, but the really interesting thing for me is this idea that this man had something, or seemed to have something. I don't know what his life is really like, whether it works for him, but he seemed a pretty articulate and bright, and the vibes I was getting were that he was a pretty cool individual, is the best way I could describe him from the outside looking in. And he had this bigger thing, and I was thinking to myself, what's the bigger thing in my life? What's the bigger thing in my 7-year-old son's life? What has my son got, archetypally, that's bigger than him, whereby he can realise that he is not the biggest thing? I think it's quite useful for us to realise we're not the biggest thing. And we're forced to realise that, aren't we? That comes to our attention. And if you want to fight that, that's going to make you unhappy, I think. If you want to embrace it, that could help you with some functional contentment and fulfillment. So, 7-year-old boy, what's bigger in his life are dragons and the magical, mystical world, whereby he can have a sense of his place in things, and he can be smaller than that, which gives him room to grow and a reference point to show him that there is a journey, that there is aspiration, that there are things to overcome, there are things to be in relationship to. And I think, it doesn't matter if it's God or if it's dragons. What matters is the dynamic, whereby you understand and respect something bigger in your life. And for me, I would call it God, but I have my own, obviously, special descriptions of that. I call it life. I think I respect life as being bigger than me. It popped me out, and it will take me back at some point, this vast energy, the everything that is life. And to me, that's what God is. So, there's a point there to invite you to consider what's bigger than you. And in terms of suicide and depression, I'm hesitant to talk about this, because, are you allowed to talk about depression and suicide? if you haven't been there or have some very close experience. You know, have you enough experience to talk about it? And like, well, fuck it, I'm going to talk about it anyway, because I mean well, and I don't mean to put anybody down, and this is an open inquiry. You know, I'm genuinely interested, and I would want to talk to you, and it's not my aim to offend anybody about this, but could it be that depression is, and you know, the hell of depression that might lead someone to suicide, is the idea that what's bigger than them is their thoughts, you know, their preoccupations, their dark preoccupations, their ideas that they can't come to terms with and resolve in their life. That's always made me unhappy, you know, the unresolvable, repetitive thoughts, and that would be that's the definition of depression I'm going to go with. And I know it's more complicated than that, but I think this is part of it as well. You know, is how on the one hand we believe the mind to be bigger than the consciousness perceiving it. That's part of the problem, as far as I'm concerned, and that's why I so subscribe and recommend meditation to help get a sense that our consciousness, that our conscious awareness is bigger than the mind. Because if we succumb and surrender to the mind as being the greatest authority in our lives, that way trouble lies. And I would say that is a formula for darkness and depression, because the way the mind works, as far as I can understand, is if the mind achieves mastery over your awareness and your consciousness, those repetitive thoughts tend to become darker and more repetitive and all-consuming to such a point. And I heard a definition. This is from my dear friend Reverend Joe, and he may have an awkwardness in how I'm talking about this, but I found his description of he was talking about suicide and Judas, and how we could reframe and re-understand Judas as the man who killed himself, having betrayed Jesus, because he felt the only way out of his shame and mortal embarrassment was to kill himself. And Joe was talking about his twin brother who'd committed suicide, and read something from Tom's account of his suicide attempt, where what drove him to kill himself was these thoughts that sounded like, you know, dark black Velcro over his mind from which there was no escape. And to me, you know, that is an overwhelming and horrible and hellish scenario that I can relate to. And I would also say that it is the mechanics of the unchecked or untrained mind. That's where it goes if it's allowed to. That's, you know, thought goes down. It's almost like a law of thermodynamics. You know, everything is cooling down in the universe, so we're told. I think thought is always becoming more negative and dark and dismal. And, you know, so there, you know, revelation, inspiration, and bright ideas that lift us up come in from the outside and can illuminate the mind. But we're in great danger if we think that we thought those thoughts. And if the mind is just left to itself without the influence of revelation and inspiration, it will be dismal and downward, and it will lead to depression, and it might lead to suicide. And we live in a world, don't we, where suicide is an option, because people are demonstrating it every day. 12 men a day are killing themselves in the UK, apparently. And, you know, therein lies another conversational can of worms. Why shouldn't they be allowed to kill themselves if they really have had enough? And I don't say that lightly, because that clearly, you know, creates a devastation for those left behind. But and God knows what else it creates. But I think we have to be. We don't have to be. We could be open enough to talk about that. You know, to talk about that people do they have the right to end it, and maybe, you know, the talking about that opens things up. It brings us out of this dead end of, you know, where people are bloody killing. Whatever we say, whatever we think we can and can't say in a conversation, whatever our thoughts are about that subjectively, people are still getting on with it and killing themselves 12 a day in the UK. So what the hell are we doing about that? Clearly, where we're at with it is not. If you want to stop suicide, clearly what we're doing about it is not really working very well. So let's not have no-go areas. Let's go everywhere with this in our endeavour. If you want a world that works, and part of a world that works is not having people kill themselves out of their utter mortal frustration, then let's not be saying what we can say and what we can't say, because I don't think that's what's making people kill themselves, frankly. I think that's something far deeper. But anyway, what is bigger than you? You know, what in your life is big? What can you surrender to? What can you succumb to? What will you respect in your life? So that was one of the big things of the moment. The other thought was that came out from the Dave Rubin report, and forgive me, I can't remember what this other guy's name was that he was talking to, but he mentioned Dr. Phil. I think Dr. Phil is an American character from, well, not a character, actual person from the Oprah Winfrey show in the States. And I might have to have a little sip of water here in this long monologue. Throat's drying up a little bit. Dr. Phil, what's he famous for? His phrase, how's that working for you, I think, is what he says. And that is a big test. Let's go into this flipping intellectual cul-de-sac as well, all right? So ultimately, after all is said and done, is the old cliche, isn't it? After all is said and done, a lot is said and not much is done. But when it comes to all this ideological stuff, we live in such a swamp of relativity, I think, of subjectivity, that no one asks the basic question. You know, like after someone's been spouting off, like me, I'm spouting off now. At the end of this, you can ask me, how's that working for you? And I think we can ask that of anyone who's talking about what they think should be done, how they think life should be lived, and how is that in their lives. And to that person, and to all of you, I'm saying, all that you believe and all that you think should be the way we live, and the ideas upon which our societies are based and our personal lives are lived, the stuff you think about that, how is it working for you? All right, and I'm sounding a bit kind of angry there, aren't I? I think, but maybe. But really, take a look. Your ideas, how are they working for you? How is it showing up in your life? Okay, so people think it's crazy that I don't want to have bad moods, but I know from my own personal experience that I don't want to inflict some bad moody fucker on my wife. Is that love? You might say, you know, it's good to love the people in your life, and the greatest basis for a marriage is love. But if you're going to be a moody bastard to your wife, is that love? Is that working for you? Is it, and more importantly, is that working for your wife? I think not. And she might say, oh, I don't mind his mood, sometimes it's part of his personality. Well, I say, take a reality check, lady, because if you're happy to put up with that shit in your life, it's probably because you want to be moody sometimes as well, and it's a trade-off. So maybe take a look at that. So, you know, what I'm trying to live is not being moody with people, and I will continue to do that. And I will continue to find the tools and the insight to create a life that works. So with the, you know, coming back full circle to this purpose in action, six-figure income. A six-figure income is not going to make me happy necessarily in its own right. It might give me access to more choices and more freedom and functionality that assists and catalyses some of my other ideas. That's why I'm interested. And I think, you know, using one of the ideas from the course, 80-20, 80% of our lives is how we're being, and 20% is all this other stuff. You know, you could call it bullshit, couldn't you? All these personal development ideas. Yeah, you've got to do something with your time. You've got to interest yourself. You've got to have some hobbies, haven't you, to pass the time with. So why not have good ones? You know, why not be interested in six-figure income that might do you and your family and your community and the world of good, to demonstrate how to do that, to lift people out of poverty, mental poverty and financial poverty, physical poverty. Why not do that? Why not understand Pareto's principle? Why not understand cash flow forecast for the benefit of yourself and a business you're developing that's a good idea that you want to share with the world? Why not? But I think that's only 20% of life, and 80% is really getting your life right. Okay, so that's, I mean, those skills help you get your life right. 20%, you know, all the projective outward stuff to do with personal development. 80% that's going to give you... Actually, I'm getting mixed up with my Pareto principle, because another way of looking at it here is the 20% of work you do on getting your life right is going to give you 80% of your joy, okay? So there's another revelation. And you know, how my ideology is dissolving or changing. You know, if this is to be an ideology, it would be the ideology of getting your life right. It's pretty easy to get new hobbies and do things that delight and interest you and get excited about and get on conference calls and so on. But the real work that's going to make a difference, and I know that's making a difference for me, is to address the things that are making me unhappy or creating drag in my life or dysfunction, the places I won't go. So, you know, if you're an alcoholic, for example, you need to sort that shit out somehow, okay? Because however successful you are, if you're a drug addict, if you're a successful corporate worker with a drug habit, I think that's going to get you in the end, okay? And you might say, well, it's part of it's how I get my functionality. But if you're using drugs or alcohol, you know in your heart that eventually those systems are depreciate and go downward, and it's not going to be sustainable, okay? So the best work for you in your life is not to get the best prices for your drugs and the best deals for your alcohol, but to think about not being an alcoholic and to begin that process of making yourself free of that kind of stimulant and crutch and dysfunctional way of being successful. Because I don't say that lightly or judgmentally. I say that like, I believe in you. I believe you have what it takes to do it without the addictive substance that you believe gets you through your life, okay? And it's fine as well if you don't. Like, you know, on one level, it doesn't really matter to me. On another level, on a human heart-to-heart level, you know, compassionately, it's not always going to work out for everyone. You know, we know that, don't we? People kill themselves. People don't escape their addictions. And that's a fact of life. And, you know, for what it's worth, I still love you. I don't even know who you are, but that's where I'm coming from. I hope you get the gist of that. Like, two things are possible. Like, I love you as a human being, and I have compassion for your struggle. And I also think you're a fucking idiot at the same time. What's wrong with that? Why can't we have those two concurrent thoughts going on together? So I think I'm going to draw a close to that ramble, and I want to talk more about these things, and I want to engage with people talking about these things. Please come back at me with you know, your own recording, your own podcast, your responses, however you express yourself. I'd love to reach out and connect with you, you know, respectfully, compassionately. This is the great gift, isn't it, of the intellectual dark web, is creating the context where people can share. It's not such a big deal, is it? I mean, obviously they've got their shtick about the intellectual dark web and they think it's the most amazing thing that's happening. It's always been a potential. I think it's always gone on somewhere. I like to think that's how I approached things in my Barefoot broadcast a few years ago. Like, you know, the important thing is not the name of it. The important thing is the phenomenon of people going a bit further, being a bit more daring, shaking themselves up from their ideology and getting to perhaps a deeper, more profound place. But more importantly than that, not just all the pontification and mouthing and blah, 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 but ideas and revelation that actually works, you know, like I'm saying, to help you get your life right, to help you create a life that works, to help us create a world that works, to be in that conversational context. And I would really, really love to hear from you and look forward to sharing with you again. We are human beings. We need to reach out. We need to connect. There is, as my favourite and greatest teacher Barry Long said, there is this relentless need to communicate. You know, love it or loathe it, you are an individualised human body being, and to get across that separation, you need to reach out and connect and talk to people. And if you don't like that, it doesn't matter. It still has to happen. Or you can go inward and you can go round in circles and you can go into darkness and depression. I think our salvation lies in reaching out to each other. Okay, flipping heck, that's half an hour of spieling, but I do really look forward to speaking from you. Take care, bye for now. And I love you, and I think you're an idiot.